Ladies and gentlemen, this is a warning. Thank you.
Plainfield, Wisconsin. This small village of less than 1,000 at last census sits in the central part of the state. Not unlike many other stops along Highway 39, it is a sleepy area. The one road downtown features a few stores and restaurants, but if you want much life, you'll need to either head up to Stevens Point or down towards Madison. And many of Plainfield locals prefer it that way, enjoying the tranquil days as opposed to the media circus that had the village on international headlines almost 70 years ago. Which all began on a November day in 1958 when the son of a local department store owner entered his family's shop to find bloodstains on the floor. It did not take police long to trace a lead to a run-down farmhouse outside of town owned by a local man most considered an eccentric oddball. What they discovered on that property would send shockwaves throughout the world, forever labeling its owner as the Ghoul of Plainfield, his residence labeled as a house of horrors, and his nefarious actions as the catalyst for some of Hollywood's favorite maniacs. But before he inspired those killers, before the sensational headlines, the grisly auctions, and shocking revelations, Plainfield only knew him as a name that they will never forget. Ed Gein.
Goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer.
There could be a serial killer in Chicago.
The Oakland County child killer.
Phantom killer.
Frankfurt slasher.
4 children have now been murdered.
Has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again.
15 brutally murdered young women.
The pattern is the same.
One by one,
The death count started rising.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them.
Strangled, stuffed in burlap bags.
It is highly unlikely that these women were murdered by separate men.
Where will the killer strike next?
Police can't answer who or why.
That's the question that we'll never know.
I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if this person's going to be caught.
I believe that there's someone out there that has knowledge.
And he's probably still at large.
If you know Unsolved, you know we value our privacy. In our personal life, it's not always easy to maintain. Whether we know it or not, sites will mine our data like full name, email, health records, and more, which they will sell to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to snoop. That's why we started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows us which data brokers are selling our personal information and automatically submits opt-out requests on our behalf. This not only reduces the amount of spam you'll get, but protects against hackers who can use this information to gain access to our social media, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also provides a ton of other features bundled into one easy-to-use app at an affordable price. You get antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without needing to bother with different apps. We all have one or more of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know how often that happens. Like 24-hour security, motion sensors, and guard dogs, Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping my info safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Relaxing. Ruinroad values our privacy, and we also value yours. Go to aura.com/ruinroad to start a free 2-week trial, also linked below in the description. It was 1909 when the second child to George and Augusta Gein was born in the home formerly located here on Gould Street in the river city of La Crosse, Wisconsin. Augusta held a deep-seated view on religion, one which she would preach to her sons every afternoon about the sins of the world, in particular the vice of women. But she and her husband had vices of their own. Both known alcoholics, and George was unable to hold down a job for long. While they resided in La Crosse, George and Augusta owned and operated Gein's Meat Market, which formerly sat on the corner of Gillette and Charles Streets, just 2 blocks off of the city's main strip in the north side. In later years, Ed would confess that he had witnessed his parents slaughtering a pig behind the building, finding himself strangely aroused at the scene. When he was just 5 years old, the family sold their business and home, which was torn down shortly after for a more modern building, and the Geins moved about 2 hours west on their newly purchased 155-acre farm on the outskirts of Plainfield in 1914. It was on this land that Augusta only grew more fervent in her hatred of the outside world, only allowing the boys to step foot off the property to attend school, where little Ed was bullied for his lazy eye and speech impediment. When he was 12 years old, his mother caught him in the act of playing with himself, and in a fury, she angrily grabbed at his genitals, calling them the curse of man. The Geins continued living their reclusive life together as the boys became men, and in 1940, George would pass away due to his continued alcoholism. After decades of a strained relationship, Augusta cared little for her husband's passing, even telling her sons that their father was burning in hell for his sins. After his death, Henry and Ed began doing odd jobs around town for money, and it was then that Henry finally seemed to get out from under his mother's thumb, beginning to date a single mother whom he planned on moving in with. While Henry had always argued against his mother's preaching about the weakness of men, Ed only fell deeper in, worshiping and adoring her, with some stating he harbored desires to become a woman himself. It was May 16, 1944, when Henry and Ed were out in a marshy section of the farm burning back the overgrowing vegetation, when their fire began to get out of control. Firefighters had to come in to help them put out the blaze, but when no one could find Henry, a search would be launched that night. They would find the 43-year-old man dead from what was listed as smoke inhalation by the coroner, but later documents indicated that bruises were possibly found on his head. And after Ed's later arrest, investigators would state they believed it was possible that he had killed his brother. Following the death of her son, Augusta suffered a stroke, leaving her totally dependent on Ed for a year, when a second stroke would prove fatal. While the rest of his family's deaths had seemed to be fine, Ed was unable to accept his mother's death, choosing to seal off her bedroom to preserve it for her return. Finding himself with much more free time, the avid reader began to delve deeper into books on headhunters, Nazi experiments, anatomy books, and erotic magazines. Locals noted he lost what little hygiene he had and grew more unstable, surviving only by continuing his odd jobs around town.
How long have you known Mr. Gein? 7 years. 7 years. What kind of a man did you know him as?
Well, a nice man, just like anybody else. The only difference I'd say in the man, he seems to be a little hot. Said he was more or less a pleasant man who would be a nice man to talk to, or somebody would like to have around. He seems to be harmless fella, you know.
Had you ever been in the man's house?
No, sir.
Never been in there. I'd like to talk now. How long did you say you'd known Mr. Gein?
Well, I've known him ever since he was a little boy.
He's lived here all his life in this farm?
Well, I don't know whether he was born here or not, but the family moved up here around 50 years ago, probably, and I knew his dad more than 40 years ago when he used to haul potatoes in town.
What kind of a man did you know Ed Gein as?
Well, he was rather simple-minded, but I always figured he was just perfectly harmless and rather simple.
Yeah, was he ever married?
2 years after her death, Ed stated he began having visions which would compel him to visit Plainfield Cemetery and dig up his mother's skeleton. Today, the Gein plot remains unmarked, but it is located right here, removed after almost constant vandalism and theft. After digging up his mother, Ed would try to shrink her head in the same way as the pulp novels he read. After this first act of grave robbing, Gein began to scan local obituaries for recent burials, and at night,
as if he was in a daze, he dug up the bodies of as many as 40 women that reminded him of his mother, across 3 local graveyards of Plainfield, Hancock Cemetery, and Spiritland Cemetery.
See, there's a bunch of photographers from the newspaper who want to take your picture. You want to take your picture?
No, not yet. Till we get taken off.
How long ago did you start?
Like I say, it might be 4 years.
4 years since you've been into a grave, huh?
That's right.
Did you take them all in 1 year?
Oh, that was off and on.
Off and on.
That's right.
What parts would you take home?
The
head and the sexual part. And you cut them out?
Yeah, must have been taken from reading about these magazines and everything. Taking the flesh off like a headhunter.
What time of the year was this when you did this?
Oh, anytime.
Anytime. Would you work all night if that? I should think you did.
That's right.
Recent grave?
That's right.
Well, how would you know when to go to the cemetery?
Well, I have to think it.
See, somebody died and
that's right.
By his own confession, in about 30 of the 40 instances, after opening the coffin, he simply reburied them as is, without taking any souvenirs. But on those other visits, he cut off parts of the body, or sometimes took the entire corpse.
Would you enjoy it while you were doing it?
That's the worst part of it. I really didn't think. I knew better, restless.
What would you do with the sexual part?
That then.
One was painted, they said.
Oh, that one, when they died, put the thing over. Is there anything like,
Oh, well, what would you do with the sexual part? Anything?
No, that's the damn part of it.
Just look at it?
Don't even do that. That's the reason I box there for years. Well, we didn't even look at it.
Also, just told them they found some more head stuff like
Skulls?
Yeah. So there must have been more graves, huh? How many graves did you open?
Well,
when you'd cut the bodies apart?
Well, there's some I didn't even
never took home. Just opened up the caskets and cut them apart there. Well, which was the first grave that you went into?
Yeah.
Adams, I thought. Did you know her when she was alive?
Not really. No.
Today, we only know 2 of the graves that the Ghoul of Plainfield stole from, as locals were so incensed at the desecration they refused to excavate any further, saying the state would have to fund any further digging if they wanted to know the truth. Both graves opened reside in Plainfield Cemetery, which sits just down the road west of Plainfield.
When you dig these graves up, you were kind of in a haze too, is that it?
That's what I could do, just
and then one time you said you were trying to realize what you were doing and you covered her up without taking anything.
That's right.
Yeah, let's go over there and check those graves, huh? You can point out the district attorney to me. And get that straightened out first, huh?
I'm afraid that if people found out about that, there might be quite an uprising.
Well, we'll do this, just the 3 of us. We've got to find out which other graves you went in and which grave you took all these heads from.
Only a short distance from the Gein plot is the grave of Mabel Everson, whose coffin was found empty. But mixed in the dirt atop was part of her skull, legs, and a few other smaller bones, along with her dentures and jewelry. Inside the grave of Eleanor Adams, the only thing to remain was a crowbar that Ed left inside the coffin after he broke it open and removed her corpse. As DNA testing did not exist at the time, the bones that were found inside Ed's home were simply buried in a mass grave, though where exactly this happened remains a point of conjecture. In 2023, a newly uncovered marker inside Plainfield Cemetery that was dedicated to, quote, the unknown dead, had many believe the grave was finally found. but it would later be confirmed as a memorial marker for soldiers lost at war, paid for by the American War Mothers Group. Ed denied that he ever had intercourse with these bodies, stating they stunk too bad, but he would begin using their flesh to construct a suit of human skin, which he believed would allow him to become his mother. Inspired by the pulp books, he used the bones to craft various household items. Bowls were made of skulls. Chairs and a trash can were upholstered in human skin. A pair of lips became a drawstring for a window shade. A belt was adorned with nipples. A face was stretched over a lampshade. Bags containing fingernails, noses, vulvas, and more parts were collected, along with something that did not come from one of the stolen corpses. A severed head with the skin peeled and turned into a mask of a woman that many believed had went missing some years before. Eight years after he dug up Mother, Ed Gein would claim his first known victim. Mary Hogan had immigrated from Germany back in 1914. By 1949, she was twice divorced and moved to Plainfield from Cicero, Illinois, to operate a small bar named Hogan's Tavern that resided at the crossroads of Highway D and Elm Road, just a little ways northwest of Plainfield. Over the years, Ed had visited a few times until the night of December 8, 1954, when he stayed until the bar closed at 4:30 p.m. Mary was in the process of having a detached home built beside the bar, but in the meantime, she lived in a small attached home in back of it, and told Ed she was closing for the day when he pulled out a .32 caliber pistol and shot her once in the head. About an hour later, a neighbor arrived at Hogan's Tavern hoping to purchase some ice cream, but when he found the front door left open and blood stains on the ground, he phoned police. A statewide alert was issued for what they classified as a potential abduction. While a cash register had been robbed, over $3,000 was found stored in the back room of the tavern. A Dodge truck seen driving away from the bar around the time of the crime was tracked down and its owner cleared. Police also searched the homes of nearby neighbors, but did not expand that search to where the home of Ed Gein was, about 6 miles to the south. While many wondered where Mary was, Ed would occasionally joke around saying, "She's never missing, she's over at my house." No one ever suspected he was telling the truth.
Like I told you, it's like I hate it. It's kind of hazy. But it comes back to it. Well, no, not fair. You remember Harry Hogan? Remember place over there? You ever go to her place?
Well, like I told them, it was probably 3 times.
It was spring the next year when the first of several robberies of similar age women occurred within a 10-mile radius along Highway D, leading some to fear a madman was on the loose. In this first case, 2 unspecified women had been held hostage as 2 men robbed their home. Next, in October 1955, 22-year-old Alice Kane was sitting in her dining room when someone fired a gun from outside her window, striking her in the back. He then entered the home to inspect the now paralyzed woman's wound before rummaging through a few drawers in the house and then leaving. Alice's 4-year-old son was inside the home at the time, but was so terrified that he refused to go out into the darkness. And so the woman had to lay on the kitchen floor for 9 hours before the boy felt safe enough to run to the nearest neighbor's home for help. This time, the surviving woman was able to help police find the shooter, and just weeks later, Harlow Kund was arrested for the crime, confessing to both these past attacks along with several other unpublicized robberies. Also unreleased was if Kuhn was ever looked at in Mary Hogan's suspicious disappearance. But with no information, by January 1956, her tavern was listed for public auction after having been put into a receivership for the past 2 years in case she was located alive. The search for Mary Hogan continued on, and just weeks before her severed head was found on the Gein farm, the Plainfield sheriff had traveled to Minnesota to question an inmate who had reportedly mentioned the crime. But back in Plainfield, on November 16, 1957, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden entered his parents' hardware store they operated on the corner of Clark and Main, where he discovered an all too familiar scene. The cash register was left opened, bloodstains spread across the floor, and his mother was missing. 58-year-old Bernice Worden operated Worden's hardware store after inheriting it from her deceased husband. That November day had been a slow one for the store, as it was the first day for deer hunting season, and the town was empty. A witness reported they had seen the store's pickup truck exiting from the rear of the building around 9:30 a.m., and it was later discovered ditched along a local lover's lane. Upon looking at the store's logbook, the last purchase recorded was a jug of antifreeze by one Ed Gein. As it was a small town, Frank and others knew that Ed seemed interested in Bernice, having previously asked her to go out skating with him. Ed saying he was just joking when she turned the offer down.
You ever asked Mrs. Worden to go out with you some evening? No, I never asked her that way. It was just a joke. You see this door there? That's all I was up here for. And I said, can you roller skate? She said, no. I said, well, I'd like to have somebody go with me to hold me up because I never roller skate. I'd be there.
In his confession, Ed stated that he had asked to look at a .22 caliber rifle in the store, which he claimed went off accidentally and killed her. Following up on the register lead, police traveled to the Gein property to question him, but Ed was not home, having been invited for dinner at a nearby country store where he babysat the family's children earlier that day. Police would return again later in the day, hoping to find Ed for questioning. But this time, finding him still gone, one of the sheriffs decided to peek inside the shed on the property. And what he found inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. Strung up like a deer carcass was the disemboweled body of Bernice Worden. Her severed head lay in a bucket, while her heart was found lying near the oven. Gein was quickly located and arrested as the nation learned the horror of what Ed did. As body part after body part was removed, everyone feared he killed more women.
What did you have along with you that day?
I didn't have anything along. That's what.
The pistol, I suppose.
No, I couldn't carry the rifle in without anybody knows. But I took my antifreeze out, went in there afterwards.
Remember killing her?
That's what I can't remember.
Well, how was Mrs. Worden?
She was hanging in feet.
How was she hanging up there? Was it rope or?
Well, there was a rope. I remember that.
Police took the Ghoul to county jail, which today has been turned into a museum. He would confess here to his grave robbing and 2 murders. But the entire confession was eventually thrown out of court when it was learned the sheriff had bashed his head into the brick wall repeatedly during questioning.
It would be kind of hard to drag her out of the store, though, wouldn't it? She's quite a heavy woman, wouldn't she? You'd throw her over your shoulder.
I'm sure that you'd like to do that.
To drag her out.
You remember carrying her in the truck? But that I couldn't sparkly.
You don't remember undressing her? Huh?
No, that's good. See that? If I hung her out, no, we could. Well, that probably had to be probably the night.
The clothes were off her before she was hung up.
That must have been her else. Well, maybe I don't know.
What did you intend to do with her body?
Years ago, when I was going to go deer hunting, of the experimenting, I put that up and was going to go deer hunting. That's what she was hanging from. Whether I'd seen her and she was a deer like, or...
What kind of a knife did you use?
I made that from a file. I grind it down.
Put a good edge on it?
Yeah.
You grind it yourself?
Yeah.
Good hard steel?
Well, it has to be. When I made that, no idea what I was going to use it for.
Over the course of the next few days, Ed was questioned on a number of other disappearances in the surrounding area. In time, some of those were solved. But as of today, the following remain cold cases. The very same year Ed first dug up his mother, 8-year-old Georgia Jean Weckler went missing from Jefferson, Wisconsin, a small city to the east of Madison. Normally, Georgia rode her bike to school, but as it had rained that morning, a neighbor picking up her own child had offered to drop the girl off after school on Thursday, May 1st, 1947. Witnessing Georgia collect the mail from her family's mailbox before starting the half-mile walk down the driveway to her house, telling the neighbor she planned to collect flowers for the May Day celebration along her walk. But Georgia never made it home. That night, a search party was launched, assuming that the girl had gotten hurt somewhere along her walk picking up flowers. But when the 200-strong search party turned up no signs of that girl, a kidnapping was feared, and someone would report seeing a young man in a dark-colored Ford sedan backing out of the Weckler driveway shortly after Georgia had been dropped off. Deep grooves found in the gravel indicated the car had been leaving in a hurry. Georgia's father was a respected community member and was Jefferson's city treasurer, pleading on the radio for his daughter's release. And though the community raised $8,000 for her return, no ransom notes ever came forward. Later that year, when 22-year-old Buford Sennett and his accomplice were arrested in northern Wisconsin for the murder of a college student and sexual assault on another, he would confess that he and an unspecified partner had abducted 8-year-old Georgia, accidentally killing her via sleeping pill overdose, and then dumping her body into the Blue River. He would recant this confession, serving time for just his other murder. Buford would be arrested yet again for sexually assaulting 2 other young women in the early 1980s and die behind bars in 2008. Investigators stated they believed his original confession to the Weckler kidnapping was a mix of both truth and lies. When Ed's property was searched, one of dozens of cars found on that farm would match the vehicle seen leaving the Weckler property. Next is the November 1st, 1952 disappearance of Victor Travis and Ray Burgess. At 7 p.m. that night, Victor and Ray left a bar in Plainfield to go squirrel hunting on farmland adjacent to Gein's property. In these woods, the men's hunting dog and one of their jackets were later discovered, and shortly after, neighbors complained of a foul stench coming from Ed's garden area, which he excused as having burnt a rat. When questioned, Ed admitted he did know Victor Travis and that he had not been happy the men were hunting next to his land, but claimed one of his neighbors had killed the men. The other possibility is the enigmatic Ray Burgess. Police discovered that this was a fake name, the real Ray Burgess having died in a car crash 2 years earlier. And a witness identified the man using his name as someone who was an enforcer for the Chicago mob. Victor's mother stated that Travis had threats made on his life previously, but for what she did not know. And when police reopened the case in 1961, they speculated that Victor Travis was a mob hit. However, another rumor swirls that a skeleton with gold teeth was discovered buried on Ed's property. And the man impersonating Ray Burgess did in fact have gold teeth. Both Ray and Victor were said to have been flashing large amounts of cash at the bar the night of their disappearance, leading many to remember Ed stole cash during both of his known crimes. Almost 1 year after their disappearance, Ed Gein was visiting his aunt back in his hometown of La Crosse when another girl went missing. It was the night of October 24th that year when 14-year-old Evelyn Hartley was babysitting for the Rasmussen family in this home in the southern section of the city, just blocks away from Ed's aunt's house. When Evelyn failed to answer the phone that night, her father drove over to check on the girl, whereupon he found the house was locked, inside appeared to be in a disarray, and the radio and lights were all still on. The Rasmussen's baby was still asleep in its crib, but Evelyn was gone. Tracking dogs followed a scent over to the adjacent garage where a pool of blood was located, and continued 100 feet back where bloody handprints were discovered on the exterior wall. The dogs were able to follow the scent for 2 more blocks until it ended at Cooley Drive. However, police believe she had been thrown into a waiting vehicle at the corner in front of the home with the bloody handprints. A 2,000-person strong search party was launched, while 3,500 locals were questioned. Police yet again learning neighbors had witnessed a car seeming to repeatedly drive through the neighborhood that night. Another neighbor heard screaming but initially believed it to just be some children playing. A driver reported a green 1942 Buick had nearly collided with him as it sped west from the city, as 2 men inside struggled with a female. However, 2 days later, south of the city, near where today the Highway 14 passes over Pamel Creek and the railroad tracks, a pair of bloody underwear and a bra were found discarded. 4 miles further down the road lay a pair of bloody men's trousers. While about 10 miles past that, outside of Coon Valley Village, a pair of bloody sneakers and a jacket were discovered. But to date, no trace of Evelyn Hartley has ever been found. These 3 disappearances are regarded as the strongest potential cases linked to Ed, though he's also questioned in various other local investigations. It was 1954, the same year Mary Hogan would be murdered, that 32-year-old James Walsh would fail to return home one day. After he disappeared, his 22-year-old wife stated that Ed began to visit and help do chores around the house, making her wonder if he had anything to do with her husband's disappearance. 28 miles southeast of Plainfield is the unincorporated community of Auroraville, Wisconsin. It was here on October 30th, 1956 that 16-year-old Judy Rodencall went missing as she waited for her bus to Berlin High School. After school, her boyfriend came over to her house to ask where Judy was and if she'd like to go on a date. But when they all realized Judy was missing, a search was launched. Planes and ground searchers covered the swampy area around Auroraville, and the next day, on Halloween, her socks and handkerchief were discovered in a creek about a mile north of the family's home. Three days after she went missing, local farmer Edgar Tim opened the door to a shed on his property in that same area when he discovered the unconscious barefoot girl lying inside. Dazed but ultimately unhurt, Judy told doctors that she had blacked out the previous 60-hour ordeal and could not remember anything. With missing girl located, no further investigation was ever held. Finally, there is the August 20th, 1956 disappearance of Irene Keating. Very little information exists about this case, but it is said the Fort Atkinson resident was last seen in Plainfield the day she disappeared. In all of the aforementioned cases, Ed was given a lie detector test, which he passed, only confessing to the murders of Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. While today we know a lie detector is not infallible, in those days it was treated as such, and Ed was never officially investigated further in the crimes. Many were still not sure of his innocence. citing the troubling fact that a dress belonging to a young girl and the severed genitalia from 2 females approximately 15 years of age were discovered in his home, when no records of any burials in that age range were recorded in the area. Others could not believe that just one small man could dig and rebury a grave in a single night without help. The bloodstains in Worden's hardware store also pointed to her body having been picked up and carried out the door, rather than dragged. At best, Ed was an unreliable source of information, diagnosed as schizophrenic while preparing for trial.
The United States Supreme Court has held that a man who is insane or is not competent to stand trial can't waive anything. And I know for the layman this may be difficult to understand, but my point is, I want to make sure that when the ruling is made that he's competent, or as sure as I can, that he is, so that everything that transpires after that, including what has transpired today, the appointment of counsel and everything else, cannot be attacked later by Mr. Gein or an attorney representing him, that he was not, on the grounds that he was not competent to make those decisions.
I felt as a lawyer, despite the publicity of this case and what people may think, I, as an attorney, have an obligation to discharge my duties to each and every client, and I feel that's my obligation, and I'm happy to serve with Mr. Belter, whom I consider a very highly competent attorney.
As he was undergoing that psychiatric evaluation, chaos had continued to descend on Plainfield. In the media frenzy, stories of all kinds came out, most of which are of a dubious nature. Lore surrounds the case that Gein had just one friend in Plainfield, a local mentally handicapped man by the name of Gus, who was committed to the hospital when he became violently insane at some point between 1953 and 1954, passing away before Ed was arrested, and thus never being able to be questioned if he had helped Ed. Even more outrageous was the story of Adeline Watkins, a Plainfield resident who claimed she had been romantically involved with Ed for nearly 20 years. Their last date had been on February 6, 1955, when Ed implied he would like to get married. But Adeline turned his offer down on the basis she felt she couldn't live up to his expectations. Watkins' mother told press that Ed was a good man who always had her daughter home by 10 p.m. Though again, no other sources ever verified these claims, nor had Gein himself ever mentioned Watkins. Since his arrest, curiosity seekers from all over had flocked to see the House of Horrors. But just 10 days before an auction for its contents were scheduled for March 30th, 1958, a mysterious fire would leave it as a smoking ruin.
There will be an auction here Palm Sunday, but this house and the personal belongings of Ed Gein will be conspicuously absent. Call it an act of God or whatever you will. The main attraction will be missing, reduced to a mass of rubble by a mysterious fire.
A few odd objects have appeared here and there since that time, while his car was the only item to ever officially be put up for sale, ending up in a carnival sideshow before the state shut it down and banned it from ever being displayed inside Wisconsin again, that car since having vanished. In 1968, Ed Gein was declared mentally competent to now stand trial after having spent the past decade in a psychiatric facility when he was declared not guilty by reason of insanity.
You worked on the defense 10 years ago, and you have met Mr. Gein again now after 10 years. How does he appear to you? Has he changed any?
Oh, he looked somewhat healthier. He seemed a rather dark and gaunt personage 10 years ago. He seems more like a middle-aged businessman at this time.
Mr. LeGrand, what has the announcement of Mr. Gein's apparent retrial done to the city of Plainfield?
Shock is probably the best word. It brought back many memories that we thought had been forgotten and hope to be able to forget permanently.
He was found guilty of the murder of Bernice Worden, but declared legally insane, and was returned to the Mendota Mental Health Institute instead of prison. There, he lived out his remaining years quietly, described as a model patient with interests in ham radio, rug making, and reading, until his death from lung cancer in 1984. Ed's body was interred between his brother and mother back in Plainfield Cemetery in this very plot. Though as stated before, the graves had to be moved into storage after repeated vandals and people chipping off pieces of the headstone for souvenirs took their toll. Though only attributed to 2 murders, the lingering shadow of unsolved disappearances in central Wisconsin continues to leave unanswered questions. The remains found in his farmhouse. Some confirmed as exhumed corpses, others too altered to identify, suggest the possibility that his crimes extended beyond what was ever proven. Just like Ed's fragile mental state, the lines between reality and fiction have become blurred over the ensuing decades, further aided by the limitations of 1950s forensics and the rural isolation of his hunting grounds. Whether he was a lone grave robber, a hidden serial killer, or something in between, the truth of Ed Gein is likely to remain buried, just like the secrets still resting in the graves he disturbed. His legacy lives on, not only in true crime history and museum exhibits, but in the twisted myths and enduring movie monsters he inspired, ensuring no one will ever forget who the Ghoul of Plainfield was.